her work isn't done yet. The special interlocutor on missing children, unmarked graves, and burial sites has her contract extended.
Don't worry about what people are going to think, because a lot of the things you might want to talk about are provocative, as they should be.
And the 19th annual Northwards Writers Festival wraps up in Yellowknife. Good evening, I'm Chris Anashkate. Welcome to APTN National News. An inquest into the death of a First Nation youth shot and killed by a Winnipeg police officer will look into what role systemic racism may have played. Aisha Hudson was 16 when she died on a highway after an alleged liquor store robbery and high-speed police chase. Manitoba's police watchdog previously found the officer involved was not criminally liable. A Manitoba judge has released a decision on the scope of the inquest. The judge wrote the inquest should examine whether systemic racism and discrimination, if any, played a part in her death. Her experience in the child welfare system and previous interactions with police should also be examined. No date has been set for the inquest, but it is not expected to take place until 2025. Inquests do not attach blame. They are supposed to prevent similar deaths. Hudson was one of 3 Indigenous people shot and killed by Winnipeg Police in the span of 10 days in the spring of 2020. A statement from the Hudson family's lawyers says they're pleased with the decision on the scope of the inquest. William Hudson, Aisha's father, says, quote, "We can no longer ignore the issue of race and how it impacts the treatment of Indigenous people by police." In Saskatchewan, where the Federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, Gary Anandasangari, explained to APTN's Rachel May the roadmap the MMIWG report has since created. She also spoke to an MMIWG family member. Here's that story.
That inquiry led to a historical report that gave us a roadmap in terms of what we need to do.
Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Gary Anandasangari says the report was vital in shaping proactive and immediate responses from the government. He acknowledges his government has taken its time implementing the calls to action, but he doesn't want to skip steps to ensure they are met.
There's a level of frustration because this is something that we need to move faster on, because ultimately I do believe that we can end this crisis. But at the same time, some systemic changes take time, and this is the constant challenge that I face is a lack of time and speed, but also making sure we do it right and not cut corners.
The report detailed 231 different calls to action, but only 2 were completed. Myrna LaPlante's aunt, Emily Osmond LaPlante, went missing in 2007. She's still missing to this day. LaPlante says when it comes to missing loved ones, the government needs to include families.
Governments really need to include families in their decision making, and there needs to be much clearer and better communication.
For someone with a missing or murdered family member, not only are they searching for answers, they're searching for a way to keep themselves safe. LaPlante says for her, safety is one of the biggest concerns.
I'm always conscious of that. I shouldn't have to always be worried about that, and I shouldn't have to worry about my granddaughters.
She is also asking the government to allocate funding when it comes to search efforts. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
It's been 5 years since the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls released its final report, and MMIWG advocates are expressing their frustration on the government's minimal progress on the document's 231 calls for justice. APTN's Fraser Needham has that story from Ottawa.
Assembly of First Nations National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak says this is not a happy day.
In Canada, the government's response to the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Women and Girls represents a historic low point. It echoes a persistent pattern of failure.
The AFN has released a new report card that says only 2 of the 231 calls for justice have been completed. Many others have only seen limited progress, and some have not yet been started. Hilda Anderson-Piers of the National Family and Survivors Circle says this is unacceptable.
That there is a lack of political will to fully implement the 231 calls to justice. And it's a real, call out for international oversight, to ensure that there's accountability and the 231 calls for justice are implemented.
Not surprisingly, the NDP was taking the Liberals to task for this slow rate of progress during question period on Monday afternoon.
And the Liberals continue to ignore this ongoing genocide. Commissioners who led this inquiry are giving this government a failing grade. Rates of violence are up. Families are left looking for answers. 5 years, Mr. Speaker, and things are getting worse. Will the Liberals stop stalling and implement the calls for justice to save lives now?
Taking questions from reporters afterwards, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations Gary Anasandagri insisted progress on the calls for justice is being made and took issue with the AFN's numbers.
I think there's a lot more than 2 that have been done. I mean, I will have to take issue with that particular number. I have a great deal of respect for the national chief. The work around the 231 calls to justice requires both the federal government, the provinces and territories, as well as civil society who have been working on this for many years. So of the 215 that directly deal with either sole jurisdiction of the federal government or shared jurisdiction, we have advanced roughly 160 of those calls to action.
Both Woodhouse, Nepenak, and Anderson Pierce say one call for justice that is long overdue is 1.7, which calls for the appointment of an ombudsperson to oversee government progress on the calls for justice. In January 2023, the Liberals appointed Jennifer Moore-Rattray to provide recommendations on who should fill this role. But on Monday, 1.5 years later, Anasandagri was still unable to say when the ombudsperson position would be actually filled.
Thank you.
Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
After nearly a week-and-a-half break, the trial for Jeremy Skibitsky continues inside a Winnipeg courtroom. Skibitsky has admitted to killing Rebecca Quantois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo woman. However, he is claiming NCR, not criminally responsible, because of mental illness. T.R. Wheatley was back in the courtroom and joins us now with this update.
This week, court will hear from Jeremy Skibicky's defense team and their witnesses as they try to prove that Skibitsky is not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder or NCR. It took all day for the judge to decide if a forensic psychiatrist from the United Kingdom would be accepted as an expert witness. Dr. Sahom Das stood in the witness box all day, answering questions about his CV and his popular YouTube channel, A Psych for Sore Minds. Crown Prosecutor Chris Vanderhooft asked Das if he was aware of the fact that if someone Google searched how to fake a mental disorder, his YouTube channel would be the first to pop up. The Crown is trying to prove Skibitsky knew what he was doing when he killed all 4 women because they were Indigenous. Vanderhooft also referenced the video that's since been taken down, where Das talks about being duped by someone claiming a mental disorder. The Crown zeroed in on Das's credibility and potential bias, as well as the fact that Das has never been qualified as an expert in Canada. The Crown also showed a couple of Das's YouTube videos, including this one where he talks about murderers and confessions.
Absolutely do not kill anybody, but if you do, don't tell anybody.
Das called the video tongue-in-cheek, meant to be a joke, to which the Crown responded, "You think that's a joke?" At one point, the judge repeatedly asked Das about professionalism in being a psychiatrist and the way he presents himself on YouTube. Court also heard that Das first interviewed Skibitsky in October 2022 when he was only charged in Rebecca Quantois' murder. Over a year later, Das re-interviewed Skibitsky. By this time, he was hit with 3 more murder charges for Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo woman. By the end of the day, the judge decided that Dr. Das could be qualified as an expert. He'll be on the stand for the next couple of days, along with another psychiatrist. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
An inmate is on the run after escaping from the minimum security Stan Daniels Healing Center in downtown Edmonton on Thursday. 31-year-old Callum O'Shea was serving a 6-year sentence for manslaughter for shooting and killing another man in 2021. O'Shea is 5'7" in height and 122 pounds. An arrest warrant has been issued by the Edmonton Police. Anyone with information on Auger's location is asked to contact police or Crime Stoppers. Auger is the 4th inmate to escape from the healing center this year at the facility.
Stan Daniels is a Section 81 facility that's operated by Native Counseling Services of Alberta. We take every escape very seriously, and so we're making those efforts to find him and get him back and maintain public safety.
Time now for a quick break. Still to come, the final report on missing children, unmarked graves, and burial sites of former residential school sites have extended. We'll tell you when, coming up next. Welcome back. The inquiry respecting the treatment experiences and outcomes of Innu in the child protection system continues this week in Sheshashit, Labrador. Angel Moore reports.
Mary Pia Benowen spoke as an expert in public health nursing. She is the primary health director in her community of Sheshashit. Benowen told the inquiry her family was moved from the land into a house with a wood stove but no running water in the 1970s.
And those houses, eventually, in the end, we had to sleep in the kitchen where there was a stove, because the rooms were all frosted with, on the walls, there was ice frosting on the walls, possibly because of condensation from us breathing in the room.
The inquiry began reviewing a 1971 report detailing provincial health authorities' visit to Innu communities, assessing health and living conditions and the need for more funding. Benowen told the inquiry her family were healthy and happy when they lived off the land, but became alcoholic and neglectful when they moved into a house in Sheshashit.
But soon as we came into the community, we know we were not going to see our parents because of drinking and partying, and that I know then that we won't have food in the house to feed our younger siblings.
Benowen told the inquiry there was one good thing about living in the house and not the tent.
When the child welfare workers came, my father was able to lock the door on them and wouldn't open the door. So I think that was good in a way that he was able to keep us safe from being taken away.
The inquiry continues tomorrow, and the final report is due at the end of September. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabuktuk, also known as Halifax.
Thank you, Angel. The work of the Special Interlocutor on Missing Children, Unmarked Graves, and Burial Sites associated with residential schools has been extended. Kimberly Murray was appointed to the role in June of 2022. Murray's work was slated to wrap up this month, with a final report to be released, but now the federal government has extended the work for another 6 months. The 2-year mandate initially came with a budget of $10.4 million. Survivors' gatherings have been held all across Canada over the past 2 years. Murray released an interim report in June of 2023. It detailed what Murray says is the failure of the Canadian government to fully fund all searches across Canada, and called out the government and churches for destroying crucial records. Murray has also called for the government to step up to counter residential school denialism. A final report will be released before the end of her mandate, and a final national gathering will be held this fall.
When it comes to larger issues, as she detailed,
survivors of a federal program that saw Indigenous students placed in boarding homes from 1951 to 1992 are one step closer to receiving compensation after a federal court has approved a $2 billion settlement agreement. Joining us to talk more about that agreement is one of the lawyers representing the plaintiffs, Doug Lennox. He spoke with our Dennis Ward earlier.
Mr. Lennox, appreciate you taking some time for us here today. Can you first tell our viewers who is covered by this settlement agreement?
Well, there are 33,000 survivors of the boarding homes program, which ran from 1951 to 1992, that are eligible for the settlement, and we hope that they will all find out about it and they will put in claims and be compensated.
Hopefully some will be listening now. When and how much could survivors see, and when could they expect to start receiving compensation?
The claims process starts on August 21, 2024. It runs for 2.5 years until February 21, 2027. Compensation is from $10,000 as an initial payment for someone who is a class member, and it can go up to $210,000 for someone who had suffered abuse or neglect. You can put in your claim form starting in August, and as soon as your claim form is processed, you can start getting a payment.
What's the process for survivors who may want to opt out of the agreement?
They have until July to opt out. I don't recommend it. I think that this is a good settlement and that they'll do better with this settlement than they would by opting out and trying to pursue their own individual lawsuit. But people have that right.
Now, the federal government and survivors reached this agreement in January of 2023. Why is it taking so long for the federal court to make its ruling?
It was a long road to get this settlement to the point where people can now put in a claim. The government had agreed back in 2023 to settle the case in principle, but there are so many details that have to be worked out. We've spent a long time thinking about making the settlement friendly for survivors and trying to avoid some of the pitfalls that other settlements have run into and getting money to people.
Mr. Lennox, we'll leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time to speak with us and let those survivors know about this.
Oh, thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Indigenous authors gathered in Yellowknife to talk about challenging colonization. We'll tell you what it all means when we're back in less than 3 minutes. Welcome back. It's that time again for our photo of the day. Today's photo comes from Aaliyah Red Sky in Vermilion Bay, Ontario. Aaliyah and her husband found a baby snapping turtle in pretty rough shape. They named him Turt Cobain and nursed him back to health. Thank you for sharing. If you want to be featured as our photo of the day, email your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. To the east, Halifax 18, Charlottetown 15. Anujoak 16, La Grande River 28 with rain. Val-d'Or 29, St. Jovite 30. Peterborough 27 with rain, Sarnia 28 with rain as well. Sioux Lookout 24, Timmins 28. Churchill 2, Le Pas 16. Gimli 20, Barons River 22. Regina 15, Saskatoon 16 with rain. Stony Rapids 15, Buffalo Narrows 16 with rain. Peace River rainy and 16, High Level 13 with rain as well. Medicine Hat 20, Red Deer 19. Campbell River 17, Tofino 14. Fort Nelson 16, Prince Rupert 12. Beaver Creek 18, Watson Lake 15 with rain. Yellowknife 14, Norman Wells 21. Inuvik 20, Colville Lake 14. Chesterfield 1, Whale Cove 3. Iqaluit 2, Igloolik 0 with sun. To Yellowknife now, where books have the ability to allow readers to see the world through a different lens. The 19th annual Northwards Writers Festival wants to emphasize the power in this by bringing together feminist authors to challenge women's roles shaped by colonization and the patriarchy. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs has that story.
Carol Rose Golden Eagle is proud to share her gift of storytelling. The Cree writer and broadcaster is one of several authors at the 2024 Northwards Writers Festival in Yellowknife that took place over the weekend.
Indigenous feminism is right at the forefront of any story I create in terms of my fiction writing and my poetry. And it is so important that Indigenous women have the ability as writers to put ourselves at the table, for a long time, because the balance was upset within what you would call a traditional Indigenous society before settlers moved to Canada. Women were very important, and then European men didn't want to deal with us, and so it upset the balance, and now we're taking that back. We're saying...
Golden Eagle is sitting in on the panel for Indigenous Feminism and Literature, joined by authors Benita Noel, Tanya Snow, Erica Doring, Lafferty, and Helen Knott.
What I'm wanting to do, as always, is Indigenous women writers, be fearless. Don't worry about what people are going to think, because a lot of the things you might want to talk about are provocative, as they should be. This is how we build. And yeah, that's it. I like you to be a rebel. Thank you very much.
Panelists discuss how the written word is a tool for the decolonization of gender, race, and class.
And I feel like we need the word feminism in order to make visible what is not heteronormative patriarchy. Because heteronormative patriarchy, it's stolen land, it's stolen bodies, and it's stolen story.
Indigenous feminism is an intersectional theory and practice of feminism that focuses on decolonization, Indigenous sovereignty, human rights for Indigenous women and their families. And that focuses on empowering Indigenous women in the context of Indigenous culture values and priorities rather than mainstream non-Indigenous patriarchal ones.
Award-winning author Helen Knott is known for her 2 memoirs framing resilience, grief, and identity. She says the more she writes, the freer she becomes, and she encourages Indigenous creatives to put pen to paper.
Even if you get that urge or inkling to write, I feel like story is always following us places and wants to come into the world. So if you feel that little tap, we always have a lot of voices in our head saying like we're not worthy, or it's not the right time, or we don't have the right skill set, to just be willing to answer that call, because story will meet you when you step out to meet it, and it ends up being this like reciprocal relationship when it comes to story. So I would say just be brave.
Charlotte Mort Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
And that's your newscast for this Monday, June 3rd. Congratulations to Brittany Guillot with APTN Investigates for winning the Canadian Association of Journalists Award for Human Rights, reporting with her story, Inside Corrections, 2,180 Days. Check it out on YouTube if you can. From everyone here in our Winnipeg HQ, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow.